Hello, I'm Vinny Raniolo, and welcome to my lesson. It's called Getting Around the Neck. So we're going to focus on a three-string approach where we're just using the E, D, and G strings for the entire lesson. So we're going to omit the A string. Now, if you're not familiar with this approach, please refer to my first lesson, which is Rhythm on Three Strings, to familiarize yourself with this lesson. Because in this lesson, we're going to take everything that we learned from the previous lesson and we're going to add a little bit more. We're going to make it a little bit more advanced. We're going to do some moving voices, which some of the top notes are going to be moving, and also some of the inner voices are going to be moving. We're going to discuss some of the moving bass lines that we can do as well, and how to really spice up the harmony of a song. So in the first lesson, we were just getting the basic voicings. So we'll take it to the next level now. Let's get in tune. So here's your low E string. Here's your A string. Your D string. Your G string. B string. Your E string. And now we should be in tune. So even though we're only using those three strings, the E, D, and G string, it's good to be in tune, all of our strings. So let's get started. I'll see you in the next segment. So now let's talk about some chords that we're going to use. The first one is a C major chord. So everybody should know this voicing. In the last lesson we discussed how we came up with this voicing. It starts on the fifth, which is the G note. We're skipping the A string. We're going to play the E, which is the third, on the D string, and then C, which is the root note on the G string. So the C is our top note. So what we're going to do now is we're going to move around the top note a little bit and see how that changes the quality of the chord. So of course, with the C on top, we have a C major chord. It's just a triad. So now if we move that down one note, instead of C, now we have B on the top. Now we just made it a C major 7. So C major, triad, to now C major 7. Even though it's only 3 notes still, it's still considered a 7-note chord because we're using one of the upper extensions, because C, E, G, and then B is our 7th note. And now if we move that one step further, we'll skip the B flat for now. We'll go right to the A. We'll keep it major. So now we just went down C, B to A. So now it's a C6 chord. So let's try strumming that a little bit. So here's your C to a C major 7 to your C major 6. So that's good. Just by moving the note on one string, we just played 3 different chords. Now let's take D minor. Now from the last lesson, we know our D minor triad, which is this chord, but we put it in the 3 notes per string, the E, A, D, G configuration here. So now we got D as the top note. Now if we lower that 1 fret, now we have a D minor major 7, because now it's a C sharp on top. It's probably a very familiar sound to hear it walk down. We're going to walk down even 1 further to the minor 7, to the flat 7, which is a C natural. And now when we get to this, we can either make it a D minor 6, which we have to kind of move our fingers around a little bit to get the 6th in there. We got to swap out that 2nd finger, 3rd finger, so the 2nd finger could go on that B note on the 4th fret of the G string. But for this, when we get there, let's go to G7 instead. So the chords that we have now are C, C major 7, which is just dropped one finger, one fret. Then we're going to bar that first finger across those 2 frets, still omitting the A. So it's just being barred over the D and the G string. And we got our second finger on the G, which is the 5th of C. And now D, D minor. We're just shifting our pinky down 1 fret to a D minor major 7, which is the sharp 7. And then D minor 7, which has the flat 7. And then G7, which you should know from our previous lesson. So G is right there. So we're going to start with that. We're going to work on a song, and I'll see you in the next segment. Okay, now before we get into the song, let's talk about how we're going to strum. All right, let's use the same chord voicings that we used in the last segment, and let's practice strumming them. Before we strum, actually, we're going to pick each note individually as if it were an arpeggio, and we do that just to make sure that each note rings out clearly, because once we start strumming, we want to avoid all the buzzes that may occur. So here we go. We'll just take a look at my right hand, and I'm going to go through the progression that we just went over. So here's your C, to the C major 7, to C major 6, back to the major 7. Now let's go up to the D minor, and the D minor major 7, D minor 7, we'll go back up, now down to the G7, and then back to the C. That's a great exercise to do. Now let's strum it. Let's just give it just a downstroke. You ready? So here we go. C major 7, major 6, major 7. Now let's go up to the D minor. The minor major 7, the flat 7, minor major 7, D, minor major 7, and now to the G. Now if it's a little bit of a faster tempo, we could add in that upstroke and give a little extra swing to it. So after you get comfortable with that, then we'll move on to the next song, which is going to be Young at Heart, which has that nice downward motion. The moving voices there works really well. So let's start with the first chord. Is going to be a C major chord, and we're going to move down to the C major 6. The melody. See how nicely that works? So that's the first phrase. Then the second phrase, we can do that D minor walk down. So to the G7. So that's the same thing that we just practiced in the last segment. So from the beginning. To the minor major 7, the minor 7 to the G7. Now for the next phrase, now we're going to skip that C sharp on the D minor chord and go straight to the C natural. So it's going to just right to the G7. So because that C sharp would clash with the melody, so that's why we skip that. Right to the G7. When you're young at heart, and there, instead of going right back to the C like that, we can go down to the 6 that we just learned. Okay, now the next part is actually an A7 chord. It's the 6th chord, a dominant 6th chord, but we want to precede that chord by an E minor. You might all know your E minor 7 flat 5, but we're not going to use the typical voicing that you learn in a guitar book, that grip. We're going to use the 3-note per string approach. So this is actually the same as a B flat 6. It's just an E minor 7 flat 5 with B flat on the bass. So it's B flat, which is your flat 5 of the chord. It's your G on the D string, which is the 3rd of the chord, then the D on the G string, which is the flat 7 of the chord. So with these 3 notes, which is actually a B flat major 6 chord, you also have an E minor 7 flat 5. We're going to see this a lot in this lesson, where one chord can be actually 2 different chords, or possibly even 3 or 4 different chords, because it's such a ambiguous grouping of notes that it could be a few different chords. So in this case, we're using it as an E minor 7 flat 5 going to the A7. So it's great the way that these voices move, because we have the B flat right there on the E string, the 6th fret of the E string, that moves right down to the A note, which is the root of our A7. So we have that moving, and then the G note stays the same. There we have a common tone, but we have to use a different finger for that. So we're just going to swap our first finger and use our 3rd finger for that. So our 2nd finger moves to the A, our 3rd finger moves to the G on the D string, and our pinky is now available to go to the C sharp on the D string, making that the 3rd of the A7. So let's get to that point again in the song. So the walk down. Then we're going to change it a little bit to the C major 6. Now here we are. So now a D7, so it does that twice. It goes to a D7, which you know. Now G7. So that we don't have to play that rhythm. I was just doing that for now to go with the melody, but it's just G, moving down a half step, moving back up to G, moving down a half step, moving back up. Now this is one of those moves where even though you could just stay in G and just play that, the melody kind of works well with that. So we'll go G, G flat, G, G flat, G, and then C. So that's a nice little half step move there. And then the next A section, the next half of the tune is that same thing. Now the same thing, the E minor 7 flat 5 to A7, E minor 7 flat 5 A7, but now instead of going to a D7, now we're going to a D minor chord. Now this chord is actually an A flat 6, but what we're going to use it now for is an F minor chord, because it has all the notes of an F minor chord. It's just in first inversion now, which we'll get into. We're going to talk more about inversions later, but let's get playing the song a little bit so you can understand it and put it into practice. So here's that F minor, because you have A flat, which is the flat 3rd of F, making it a minor chord. Then we have F on the 3rd fret of the D string, which is our root note, and then we have C, which is our 5th note. C is the 5th fret on the G string. And then here's the best part, you have a head start. So that part, here's the best part, is just a 1-6-2-5. 1, 6, 2, 5. If you are the that just stays on a D minor chord for that whole section, and then you're on a C. So let's go to the split screen and let's play it really slowly and follow along with what I'm doing.